time is now 9:51 a.m. and a quorum of the board is present. State Board of Education meeting of January 14th, 2025 is called to order. First item on the agenda is the approval of the agenda in order of priority. Are there any items that board members would like to add or delete from the agenda?
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I move to put a resolution in support of additional funding for a statewide expansion of career and technical education known as CTE.
Moved by Dr. Pugh. Do we have a second? Seconded by Ms. Lipton. Dr. Pugh, to you to discuss or to read it into the record.
We've long known the importance of CTE. CTE has grown to be a tremendous pathway, not only for students to get an opportunity to learn more about careers and what they want to do to contribute to society, but also as a pathway to post-secondary education. And so we know that it is important to ensure that this is adequately funded and equitable to students across the state of Michigan. And so I move to put this on the agenda for further discussion later today.
Okay, is there any other discussion about putting this on the agenda? Hearing none, Ms. Evans, a roll call vote, please.
Bullock?
Yes.
Lipton?
Yes.
McMillan?
Pass.
Pritchett?
Yes.
Pugh?
Yes.
Robinson?
Yes.
Snyder?
Yes.
And Tilly?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Very good. Are there any other elements to be considered for the agenda? Hearing and seeing none, may I please have a motion to approve the agenda as presented?
So moved.
Ms. Lipton, seconded by Dr. Pritchett. Is there any discussion? Please, Mr. McMillan.
Yeah, at the beginning of my new 8-year term, I'll be voting no on agendas unless we get some more substantial and significant items on the agenda, like the special education lawsuit and the compensatory services denied to hundreds of thousands of students during COVID and post-COVID, emergency operations plan, EOPs, and the safety of students in our state, literacy and the debacle that has been going on for decades, and transparency and accountability to parents on what's going on in classrooms, with these the matters that I don't think are as substantial and significant as those that are just not addressed. So I'll be voting no. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other discussion? Hearing and seeing none, if we could have a roll call vote to approve the agenda as amended.
Bullock?
Yes.
Lipton?
Yes.
McMillan?
No.
Pritchett?
Yes.
Pugh?
Yes.
Robinson?
Yes.
Snyder?
Yes.
And Tilly?
Yes.
Motion carries.
This time is Liz Evans, State Board Executive, will introduce members of the State Board of Education.
Good morning. You have just been listening to Dr. Michael Rice, Chairperson of the State Board and State Superintendent. To his left around the table is Board President Dr. Pamela Pugh from Saginaw, Board Co-Vice President Ms. Ellen Cogan-Lipton from Huntington Woods, NASB Delegate Dr. Mitchell Robinson from Okemos, Miss Nikki Snyder, and Miss Kelly Kuzmano, 24-25 Michigan Teacher of the Year. Now seated to my right is Mr. Tom McMillan from Oakland Township, Board Treasurer Mr. Marshall Bullock from Detroit, Board Co-Vice President Ms. Tiffany Tilley from West Bloomfield, and Board Secretary Dr. Judith Pritchett from Washington Township. Joining us virtually today is Ms. Emma Young, the staff member representing the Governor's Office.
Thank you very much, Ms. Evans. The public may register to provide comment during public participation of the meeting at approximately 1 p.m. Those wishing to make public comment must register before 1 p.m. Provide public comment by telephone. Please complete the registration form on the MDE webpage, www.michigan.gov/MDE. To provide public comment in person, please complete a green public comment form when you arrive here at the meeting location. These instructions are listed on the MDE webpage at www.michigan.gov/MDE. The first order of business today is the ceremonial swearing in of Ms. Nikki Snyder and Mr. Tom McMillan. It is the board's custom to have a ceremonial swearing in during the first official meeting of newly elected board members. Ms. Nikki Snyder and Mr. Tom McMillan were re-elected by the voters during the general election on November 5th, 2024. Their new terms of office began on January 1st, 2025, and they have been officially sworn in prior to today. Ms. Nikki Snyder and Mr. Tom McMillan, if you could stand up, please. And we will do this. We'll do this together. I, and fill in your name.
I, Tom
Nikki
McMillan,
Snyder,
Very good. Do solemnly swear
solemnly swear
solemnly swear
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of this state,
and the Constitution of this state,
and that I will faithfully discharge
and that I will faithfully discharge
the duties of the office
the duties of the office
of State Board of Education
of State Board of Education
according to the best of my ability.
according to the best of my ability.
Congratulations to you both. Do either of you have any guests here today that you would like to introduce? Ms. Snyder?
Michael Stroud.
Okay, very good. Welcome. Board, the next item on the agenda is the election of State Board of Education officers for 2025, 2026. Each odd year, according to the bylaws, State Board of Education members elect officers for president, vice president, secretary, treasurer, and NASB delegate. And NASB, for those of you who are out there in non-state board land, is the National Association of State Boards of Education. We will begin with nominations for the office of president. Are there any nominations for the office of president? Ms. Lipton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to nominate Dr. Pamela Pugh for president of the board.
Okay, Ms. Lipton nominates Dr. Pugh. Do we have a second? Second by Dr. Pritchett. So that is the first nominee. Are there any other nominees? No. Hearing and seeing none. We will close the nominations. And if we could have a roll call vote, Ms. Evans, for the office of president.
Bullock?
Yes.
Lipton?
Yes.
McMillan?
No.
Pritchett?
Yes.
Pugh?
Yes.
Robinson?
Yes.
Snyder?
No.
And Tilly? Motion carries.
Okay, very good. Congratulations, Dr. Pugh. I'll give you a round of applause as well. Nominations are in order for the office of vice president or co-vice president. Are there any nominations
Mr. Chair.
therefore?
I-
Dr. Pugh.
I move to nominate Tiffany Tilly and board member Ellen Cogan-Lipton for co-vice president.
Okay, so Dr. Pugh nominates Ms. Lipton and Ms. Tilly for co-vice president. Is there a second? Second by Dr. Pritchett. Any other nominees for co-vice president? Hearing and seeing none, we'll close the nominations. And Ms. Evans, if we could have a roll call vote on co-vice presidencies.
Bullock?
Yes.
Lipton?
Yes.
McMillan?
No.
Pritchett?
Yes.
Pugh?
Yes.
Robinson?
Yes.
Snyder?
No.
And Tilly?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, very good. Thank you very much, board. Are there any nominations for the office of secretary? Dr. Robinson.
I would like to nominate Dr. Judy Pritchett as secretary.
Dr. Robinson nominates Dr. Pritchett. Is there, and Ms. Tilly seconds the motion, or the motion. Thank you very much. Are there any other nominees for secretary? Hearing and seeing none, nominations are closed. And Ms. Evans, if we could have a roll call vote on secretary.
Bullock?
Yes.
Lipton?
Yes.
McMillan?
No.
Pritchett?
Yes.
Pugh?
Yes.
Robinson?
Yes.
Snyder?
No.
And Tilly?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Very good. Thank you very much. Board, are there any nominations for the office of treasurer? Would anybody like to move anyone for treasurer? Hearing in Dr. Pritchett.
I would like to nominate Senator Marshall Bullock for
Senator-
treasurer.
Senator Marshall Bullock is nominated for treasurer. Are there any seconds?
Support.
Okay, so supported by Dr. Pugh. Any other nominees for treasurer? Hearing and seeing none, nominations are closed. And Ms. Evans, if we could have a roll call vote.
Bullock?
Sure.
Lipton?
Yes.
McMillan?
No.
Pritchett?
Yes.
Pugh?
Yes.
Robinson?
Yes.
Snyder?
No.
And Tilly?
Yes.
I thought I'd be your one yes today.
So a little levity goes a long way. Thank you very much, Treasurer Bullock. Are there any nominations for the office of delegate to the National Association of State Boards of Education? Dr. Pritchett.
I would like to nominate Dr. Mitchell Robinson for delegate to NASB.
Dr. Pritchett nominates Dr. Robinson. Is there a second associated therewith? Ms. Lipton seconds. Are there any other nominees for delegate to NASB? Hearing and seeing none. Nominations are closed. Ms. Evans, a roll call vote, please.
Bullock,
Yes.
Lipton,
Yes.
McMillan,
No.
Pritchett,
Yes.
Pugh,
Yes.
Robinson,
Yes.
Snyder,
No.
and Tilly.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, let's give a round of applause to our officers. For the next item on today's agenda at 10:02 is student art from East
Excuse me.
Kentwood. This is a presentation on the importance of art. Today's presentation will feature the artwork of a student from Kentwood Public Schools and reflections by the student and teacher. We welcome our presenters, Dr. Renee Garcia, Director of the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, Ms. Lei Tran, art teacher at East Kentwood High School, and the 2020 Michigan Art Education Association Secondary Art Educator of the Year, and Keziah, a student at East Kentwood High School. This is an informational presentation. No board action is required. Presenters, welcome.
Good morning, Dr. Rice, board members. I am thrilled to be sitting here today with Keziah and Ms. Tran. I've had the opportunity to get to know them as we prepared for this presentation and to learn about their stories, and I'm really excited for you to do the same. So with that, I'm going to pass it right off to Keziah.
First off, I would like to thank Dr. Garcia for bringing me here and inviting me here to this meeting. And I'm going to start off with my artist statement. So as someone who hasn't really experienced the world in a privileged environment from birth, it's weird to ask yourself, what do you represent? Where do you fit in? And as being Blackfoot, Native American, and African American, my culture was washed away bit by bit over the course of America, wiping my people and languishing my culture's language and expression through clothing, art, and religious inclusivity. Being discriminated against and oppressed by the societal judgment that Indigenous and Black people had to endure, from verbal hate crimes to murder as a whole. The freedom of cultural pride that my ancestors had to swallow and push down to appease those who came from a fixed mindset to discriminate against and believe punishment based on skin tone and background were deserved. Not knowing where I came from had a big impact on my identity and who I am and who I represent to myself and others. Seeing those who can freely express themselves culturally and experience backlash and guilt from not knowing where they came from and where their ancestors resided caused envy and pressure onto my mental health. But it also encouraged me to reach out and cultivate my own knowledge of where I came from and the significance of my ancestors and my family's ethnic identity to give myself a purpose of who I represent. It reached a point in my life where I wanted to make a change in my family and embrace the beauty of who we are passed down from generationally and what they fought for our rights and the cost of their freedom. I wanted to show that through the process of how I evolved and showed the pride that my ancestors and family never knew how to show. Through an episodic viewpoint of how I reached the epiphany of self-love and affection to embrace my own culture. And moving on, okay, Filtering Hues, that's the first art piece that I decided to show in this presentation. And this one shows like the time and reversal of cultural representation. How my skin color was washing away, how you can see my hair is turning blonde in part of it in the middle section of my piece. And like my head wrap towards the end, if you could. Towards the right of my piece, how it's my ethnic head wrap, what I usually wear at the moment, representation of my African American culture. But that shows how I felt like my ethnicity, my race was washing away as my history was washing away. And so for my next piece, I would like to show, this one is called Gaze Upon Your Words of Explanation. And this one represents how the words of my culture, on the next slide, was inspired by how I wanted to include my native tongue and show the beauty of language display, which the language represented here is Algonquian. And it hasn't been representative to like modern modern like Native American like language and tongue. And for my last piece that I decided to show in this presentation is called Abundance and Embracement. And this work consists of me playing with exaggerated colors and values of fluidity. But you can see in the next slide, the main like animal, like reptile I used was snakes, and snakes represent immortality, and of how I realized that my culture is living through me, and I don't have to feel like I'm losing myself. And it also represents my Blackfoot Native American heritage, but it's also known as Siksika. And the vibrant colors display the range of variety in Siksika attire and the traditional practice, which consists of the usage of floral and enhanced blooming of colorization for tapestry and beadwork. You can also see the main colors used in the background and foreground are blue, yellow, red, white, pink, green, and gray, representing earth, the cosmos, the elements, plants, animals, and humans, thus showcasing the vitality of life. Connecting those beliefs are that of nature, as it is one of many historical importances in indigenous culture. And I've added the Galidaria puchella, which is a specific flower used to symbolize bravery and good luck. It heavily connects to this artwork because my topic consists of not being able to find my roots and show off my culture. The snakes show immortality, as I said before, that my tribe and my practice of my heritage live through me and those that I kin with. Teaching myself that I should embrace where I came from and knowing the beauty of which I came from. Therefore, teaching others so they can also embrace the beauty of which they've come from and where they stand within themselves. And that is my whole presentation.
Thank you, Keziah. Good morning. Again, my name is Lei Chan, and thank you, Dr. Rice, for this honor. I just want to give you a snippet of what East Kentwood High School is like. We are the most diverse high school in the nation, not just here in Michigan, but in the nation. So what does that look like? I would like to invite you to our school for a visit anytime you like. Just call our principal, Mr. Bakri Omar. We have over 85 different languages. It's so beautiful. It's like our universe compacted into this campus. Everywhere you walk down the hallway, you hear languages from all over the world. As a matter of fact, at the end of the semester of last year, I had a student that came in from the Congo and not a lick of English. But these kids catch on really fast. They learn very quickly. And in my classroom, Keziah's portfolio, she produced this in her AP Art course. And in this course, we ask our students to search and find their own roots and identity. And you just saw that example. So we embrace all sorts of, you know, for lack of a better word, people from all over the world, And the kids are very accepting of different culture, different nationality and languages and all of that. It's an accepting environment and a safe environment. And Dr. Rice, thank you for visiting us in the fall. And so it's an honor to be a teacher at such a school. And I'm learning a lot from my students. And Keziah's work portfolio was such an exemplary of you know, what we do in the classroom. As a matter of fact, her work is so excellent that the AP College Board use her work as an example. So if you go into the AP College Board website, you'll see her work. It's the top tier, score number 5. an example of what students' AP work should look like. That's it. Thank you very much.
Both for sharing your stories and for braving the road conditions this morning. We're really glad that you made it to share. So back to you, Dr. Rice.
Board members, questions and comments for our presenters, getting us going today on what inspires our students and our teachers. Please, Senator.
I just want to say you are really talented, and I'm impressed at how you're so intentional with connecting, and then the artwork is so vibrant that I could feel all this. So my kids are artists, but nothing like this. This is I mean, like my daughter has at the DIA, but this is like on a whole nother level. Like this is like grown folk not doing this. So just to admire how you sticking to your cultural roots and the way you are able to display that through your artwork is impressive.
Thank you, Senator. That was very kind. Ms. Snyder.
Are you able to take this art to fairs and shows and start to display and?
Yeah.
Okay, you should, as soon as you can.
Thank you, Ms. Snyder. Ms. Lipton?
Thank you, all presenters, and Keziah. You know, your work is really spectacular. Really, it's just, it's hard to put into words, you know, just really how tremendously impactful your work is. My question really for the panel is, how has your ability to be able to have that kind of robust art experience sort of shaped your experience in high school, just in terms of the environment that it has created at your high school, your relationship with other students, teachers, and in the overall school community?
It shaped me in a way where I felt in East Kentwood High School, it's the most diverse school I've ever been in general. Just Kentwood Public Schools in a whole, it's the most diverse place that I've ever been gifted my education with. So having to be in a diverse environment, wanting to find myself, seeing other people in like classes where usually you would think it's sometimes you see like predominantly white schools. Sometimes you see schools with not that many people of color, not that many people that are around the world. So just being in like a school where you can express yourself through, you know, different languages with each other, it impacted my art in a way where I felt like if I'm in a safe place where I can go and express, you know, my culture, where I come from, like where I want to know where I came from. So in, you know, that era of my art, I decided to make that portfolio as in like a search of my own ethnic background. Also just being in like classes, like you have different classes for different things, different languages, the new AP African American Studies as well. Like you have classes like that where everybody's not left out. You have a place to be in East Kentwood High School. You have a place to be in Kentwood Public Schools as a whole district. So that impacted my art in a way where I feel included and I can speak my background, where I am from.
And then just a follow-up, it certainly sounds like you've been able to express yourself outward. Do you feel that the ability to operate in a diverse environment was a sort of a good learning opportunity for your peers, perhaps, to be able to connect with you and others who may not be, you know, have the same experience that you have?
Yes, I would consider it like a great opportunity to connect with other people, especially uh, if it comes down to like what Ms. Trent said, with learning like languages like English, for example, with the student from the Congo, having to learn like new languages, adapt to new things. I feel like it's really beneficial. And you get to learn where other people have come from. You have like experience to include everyone where who you don't know where they're from. But yeah.
You.
Please, Dr. Robinson.
First of all, I want to thank you for sharing your work today and for sharing your expertise with us. It's a really good reminder that art, and I'm going to include music and dance and theater as well, are legitimate and valid subjects for us to be teaching in schools, that they give children and communities an opportunity to explore our history, our traditions, our backgrounds, our cultures in ways that no other subjects do. And sometimes I look at changes in education over the past 30 years. I see a narrowing of the curriculum to certain subjects and others kind of left out as maybe just activities for a few. And I think your work here is a reminder that art and the other arts are for every child and for every school and every community. So thank you for what you're doing, and it's a great reminder for all of us about the importance of the arts in education.
Thank you, Dr. Robinson. Dr. Pugh?
Thank you, thank you for your work, for your boldness. Just remembering going back in time when I was your age. It was not that long ago. Never mind the grade. But and just what you've contributed to help a person such as myself at that age, at your age, to feel safe, and as if knowing that they belong, and just thinking of your work and thinking of artivism and art used to help shape and change culture, to help create safe environments, within your school and beyond. And I just thank you for that. And to Board Member Snyder's question, um, how have you used this or been able to be a part of other community activities? And what comes to mind is NAACP has this competition that they do every year across the country, wherever the NAACP convention is, and it's AXO, it's arts and culture, technology, sciences, Olympics, and wondering if you've been a part of any of that work. I'm sure that they would love to have this work, but also it's an opportunity to meet with others across the country who are like-minded and doing some of the similar work that you're doing, which is amazing.
So have you been in AXO?
Have you heard of it?
No, but
Go find it.
I'm in the NAACP. Though. I'm a member of the NAACP.
Okay.
Okay.
I have never heard of that
Okay.
Axel, but I will check it out. I will check it out.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Pugh. Ms.
Ask
Snyder?
one more question, just to echo what Dr. Robinson mentioned about art, music, and dance. How has art helped you engage in the other coursework in your education? And hopefully that's not too tough, but I imagine that it has really helped you in certain ways. But
Like art has helped me in other coursework. For example, I kind of find I'm in AP African American Studies at the moment, and so since it's like a new course in like College Board, I ended up finding out more about myself, more about, especially for me being as well African American, learning through like that class what we weren't taught in original school curriculums, in U.S. history and beyond, that African Americans had like a really large impact in the history of the United States. So using like how my art has influenced me in other courses, it gives me more fuel and more like background to produce more things of my
Connections.
yeah of my race and where I've come from
Yeah.
as well. It's a little bit harder for me for studying and trying to research more about Blackfoot Native American history, since it's sometimes it's so like watered down and diluted in this country where you can't really find as much as you wish you could find. Um, so I would say it impacted me a lot to try to explore more and try to learn more about certain subjects such as those.
Thank you, Ms. Snyder. Any other questions from board members? Kasaya, when do you start doing art substantially?
I would say around when I was younger, probably like 5 or so. That's when I was just making like doodles and drawings that didn't have really like as much meaning as now. But the more that I started getting older, I started drawing different things. Was when I was around like 7 and 8, is where I would start putting more thought into what I drew. But that's roughly around where I started doing art.
Okay. And the art gets you interested in other courses, to Ms. Snyder's question,
Yes.
right? And would school be as interesting without it?
No.
And I think that's the beauty of your experience at East Kentwood High School, but the sorrow of the experience of some others who don't necessarily have the art, the music, the theater, the dance that others have in corners across the state. There really is an inequity. And the narrowing of curriculum that Dr. Robinson spoke of dates back at least to 2002 with No Child Left Behind, where there was this feeling we were going to narrow and deepen and strengthen our work in a couple of subject areas nationally, and that did not happen. What ended up happening was it turned kids off because we lost or diminished the work in some of these other areas, the art, the music, the drama, the dance. The kids really get geeked on. And for that matter, science and social studies as well got short shrift for a good portion of the last quarter of a century. So we're really delighted that you're here, Ms. Tran. We're so appreciative of you. The third drawing, the third artwork that you shared, tell us where that artwork is.
I believe I think, was it in your office?
It is. It is not going to an art fair anytime soon, but it is beautiful, and it is extraordinarily well done. And if anyone would like to see it, it is on the wall in my office. I really appreciate. I was very surprised to turn the corner at East Kentwood High School and to have this art experience. Schools show you what they're proud of, and East Kentwood has a lot to be proud of. And one of the things that it was proud of was the art produced by your students, Ms. Tran, and by extension, Keziah and her extraordinary work. I do think kids finding themselves in art is a frequent occurrence, but it's not going to take place automatically. Kids aren't going to necessarily have art supplies early and be engaged early. It takes great teachers, it takes a setting to really draw kids out and get them geeked about studying their history and their languages and their literature and really becoming more complete. A number of people have talked about the perniciousness of narrowing that curriculum. And we believe really strongly in opening up that curriculum including but not limited to art. So we appreciate you. We thank you. I told you this was easy peasy, lemon squeezy, that you had this. Please give our presenters a round of applause. Thank you very much. Kasai, would you like to introduce your mom and your sister for us?
So we have my mom, Chantel Arrington, and then that is my sister, Shaundra Arrington.
Thank you very much. Thank you. So board, it's 10:26. The next item on today's agenda is a presentation on Partners in Progress, Amplifying Indigenous Voices in Michigan Schools. Today's presentation will introduce the Indigenous Education Initiative, explain how collaboration with the Confederation of Michigan Tribal Education Departments works, and share efforts to increase educator understanding of Indigenous knowledge systems and history. We welcome or re-welcome our presenters, Dr. Renee Garcia, Director of the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, Jen Huskin-LaPointe, Initiative Director, Mitarbeiterin, or one who works with, not does to, and Melissa Isaac, Gijwazid, or Protector of the Young. You can't blame a guy for trying. This is an informational presentation. No board action is required, and I am going to join our presenters.
Buju Endenwe Maganak, Wabzikwe Dijnakas, Name Dodam, Saginaw Chipwakeen and Donjaba, Gijwasir no Nungshe. My English name is Melissa Isaac, as Dr. Rice so graciously introduced. I'm a citizen of the Saginaw Chippewa Indian Tribe. I am Gijwasid, or Protector of the Young for the Michigan Department of Education's Indigenous Education Initiative, and I'm a doctoral candidate at Central Michigan University. Fire up.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Jen Huskin-LaPointe. I serve as the initiative director on paper, but in my familial language, my role with the team is Mitarbeiterin. Nice work. That means someone who works alongside others and does not do two. So really, really pleased to be here. Thank you so much for the invitation. And we're excited to share what we've been working on. We know that the primary focus for today is around the Indigenous history effort that we're working on, but we thought it might be helpful to give you a little context of who we are and what we do so that it fits.
All right, well, I'll begin. I have the honor of having served my tribe as the education director for over 20 years. I worked in the tribe's education system. And during that time, we did a lot of work with our Indigenous learners, but didn't really know what anybody else was doing as far as the state or local education agencies or anybody else who is also responsible to our learners. And so we have a word for this in our language, the way that everybody was kind of operating in silos. And that word is ninwe, we, but not you. So we were doing what we were doing in our tribe for our students, but none of you were probably allowed even to come in and help us out. But also reciprocally, Ginwa, you all were doing things, but not including us either. So we were siloed. And so with the Indigenous Education Initiative, what we're doing is making real progress toward Ginwe in our language, which means you and me, us together, for the sake of our learners. And so that's really the foundation from which we operate through the Indigenous Education Initiative. Going farther with that word, Ninwe, in my time as us but not you, as an education director, I think it's important that everybody here has some context for Indigenous people, tribal nations that share geography with Michigan. We are not Michigan's tribes, and I know a lot of people will refer to that as Michigan's tribes. We share, as sovereigns, geography, geopolitical status with Michigan. And so there are 12 federally recognized tribes that share geography with Michigan. And as you can see on the map there, that's where the seats of government are located. So our elected leaders, our tribal chiefs, our tribal councils, and some of our population live around those areas. In my opinion, Saginaw Chippewa Indian Tribe is the best one. No, just kidding. Just kidding, relatives. We're all over the state and in the UP. But the thing that we have discovered in doing our work is that a lot of folks think that that's where Indigenous learners are located, and that's it. That's a myth. There are Indigenous, we heard from one of our relatives here, one of our Indigenous relatives who attends school at Kentwood Public Schools. I'm sure she's not the only one. And so we have in Detroit, in our urban areas, in our rural areas, Indigenous learners all across the state of Michigan. But as you can see right here, this is the seats of government for the 12 federally recognized tribes in Michigan. Each of those tribes has an education system of some sort. They do not look the same. For example, in my previous role at the Saginaw Chippewa Indian Tribe, we have an early education immersion in our original Anishinaabe language school for 2, 3, and 4-year-olds. From there, some of them, not all of them, transition to the K-5 elementary sovereign school. And I call it sovereign school because the tribal council funds that school. They opt into things they want to that doesn't compromise sovereignty, and they opt out of things that do compromise sovereignty. So they have that choice to make. From there, they go to public schools where we utilize federal funding to support them in the surrounding public schools, Title VI. And so in every school building in Mount Pleasant Public Schools, Shepherd Public Schools, Beale City Public Schools, we have, we call them advocates and tutors to help them navigate those systems. From there, we have a post-secondary scholarship program and a tribal college. It's a 2-year college, the Saginaw Chippewa Tribal College. So ours is quite substantial compared to some of the other nations who maybe have a couple of people on staff to do and provide resources and services for their students in the best way that they can with what they have. So along the bottom, you can see that those are the seals of the 12 federally recognized tribes, each with their own education department. When those directors come together, that's the bigger seal that you see on top there, the Confederation of Michigan Tribal Education Departments, where all the tribal education directors come together quarterly and meet a couple of times a month virtually to discuss what are the issues with Indigenous learners, what are you doing that is helping to support our learners, what are the things that maybe you had challenges with, and they have those discussions during that time. Now I'm going to go to Guinea, which is, this is what we were doing as tribal education directors, and now here's what the state is doing, and I'm going to hand that over to my colleague, Jen.
Good morning again. So as Melissa mentioned, there was a great deal of work that was happening in the tribal communities around their education systems, around supporting their Indigenous learners. And in about 2013, 2014, I came back to Michigan, born and raised, left, came back to Michigan on a completely unrelated work detail. And my husband, Lynn LaPointe, who is Hichangu Lakota from South Dakota, he and I were both here, and we were just kind of curious because we'd been doing a lot of work with the tribes in the Dakotas and Minnesota and with their state departments and all this work. And we were basically saying, well, what is the department, what is Michigan doing with their tribes? And we found out that there were some efforts, some kind of siloed efforts here within the department, but the most common response we got back actually was, do we have tribes? And we thought, oh, okay. So we started to have a lot of conversations. I know she's right behind me. Wave. So you all know Terry Rink, Director Terry Rink, as Director of the Office of Special Education. We know her as the department's tribal liaison, which I'm going to get into in a little bit. But we started having conversations about the fact that there are tribes in Michigan. There are a lot of Indigenous learners in Michigan. There are Indigenous learners in all of Michigan's public schools. And really, what would be the response of the department to support not just Indigenous learners individually, but the systems where they're getting their education? And so fast forward to the fall of 2016, the Michigan Department of Education's Indigenous Education Initiative was formed. Formally, we as an initiative work across all offices within the Department of Education. Over the years, we've worked with, I believe, all but one, actually, office here within the department. And we really sit in the space between the department and the tribal nations, and specifically partner with CMTED, the Confederation of Michigan Tribal Education Departments that Melissa referenced. So we sit in really interesting space. We get to have a lot of really interesting conversations with a lot of different folks. But as Melissa mentioned, it's a geopolitical relationship. This is a government-to-government relationship that we've stepped into. And so we built it the way that we thought it should be built, which was to truly acknowledge the government-to-government relationship that the state of Michigan has with tribal nations in Michigan. And we adopted a system called collaborative governance. We truly co-govern in Michigan. It's when we have conversations with our colleagues in other states, the biggest question we often get is, how are you doing that? A lot of will, honestly, and a lot of willingness to come to the table to have a very different type of conversation and a true acknowledgement of this government-to-government status that the state of Michigan has with the tribes. Not that it's just a good idea, there actually is a requirement. Executive Directive 2019-17 was signed by our current governor in the fall of 2019. She carried forward a long-standing, the first accord actually between the state of Michigan and the tribes was an accord done in 2002. So she continued efforts from previous governors, both Democratic and Republican, and basically put in place the expectation from the governor's office on what the relationships would look like from the state agency to the tribal nations in Michigan. I'm not going to read all the details that are on the slide, but the one that I do want to specifically call out is the last one, which really puts together an infrastructure. So as I mentioned, Terry Rink is the Department of Education's liaison. Every state agency in Michigan has a tribal liaison. In some cases, that's their job. In other cases, they create something like our Indigenous Education Initiative to almost be the proxy in that space. We have a consultation policy that was actually signed, reviewed and signed by Dr. Rice shortly. I think that was about 30 days into your time here. But we have a co-designed consultation policy, and then there are training components that are required. This is not education specific. This executive directive is for all state agencies here in Michigan.
So when we talk about the consultation policy and this government-to-government collaborative governance structure, again, I was an education director at that time, and the Indigenous Education Initiative said, we need to put this on paper, and we can't do it without you as truly collaborative partners. So luckily for them, I'm in the top right on the beach reading other state consultation policies because I love policy. And we formed this little policy posse, we called it. Our colleague on the bottom right there, she showed us a picture and said, oh yeah, you're on the beach. Well, I'm in Cabo, so I'm reading policy here. So it just happened to be that the right people were in the right place who really wanted to make this something different and not a checklist or of requirements, but truly ground in the idea of relationship and doing things together. Part of that consultation policy and the way that we operate is accepting the responsibility of keeping Indigenous learners as the focus of our work. Hearing our young relative that was presenting earlier today just reminded me they're powerful. Our young people are so powerful and they have important things to say and we need to listen to them. We make decisions based on what is best for them, not what is best for me, not what is best, but what does this system want, what does that system want? Because oftentimes what is best for the student is not what is convenient for the system. And so we really try to navigate that so that we're truly doing our best by our learners.
A big component of our work, and if you spend any time with us going forward, I'm reflecting on my very first time sitting at this board table and talking about the importance of relationship. This isn't something we just talk about, this is something that we live. When we talk about the work of IEI or Indigenous Education Initiative, we talk about living and learning in relationship. And that's a relationship with everybody. It's intentional that this initiative leadership looks like this because we are representative of the systems that Indigenous learners are in. And that's not just Melissa, that's Melissa and Jen. Our team that we have is representative of the system that we are working in on behalf of Indigenous learners. And so the component and the principle of really maintaining strong, authentic relationships is the root of what we do. One of our relationships, and that we're going to talk about the rest of our time today, is around Indigenous history. And I know one of the relationships we've been able to forge over our time here is with the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion with Dr. Garcia. I don't know if you want to share anything about your experience first.
Absolutely, I do. So that was my first experience. When I started working here at the department, within the first 2 weeks, I received a call from Jen, and we had the opportunity to start talking, and she shared with me about the Indigenous Education Initiative. I didn't know about it. She shared with me about the Confederation of Michigan Tribal Education Departments and how the two work together, what you've gotten today. During these past 3.5 years, I've been truly honored to be invited into many discussions, into meetings, into celebrations. All of those opportunities have been about building that relationship and learning so that then we could take that learning to the next level and help others grow their knowledge. And we couldn't do it if we hadn't first forged those relationships. It's been an honor. I think about it's humbling how welcoming and the sense of belonging that I can have when I join the IEI team and the Confederation of Michigan Tribal Education Departments to sit in their space and to learn from their perspective. So thank you both, and to the IEI team and to CMTAD for welcoming me.
One of the projects, excuse me, one of the projects that we have a lot of projects we're working on, first of all. One of the projects that we're working on is Indigenous History in Michigan. And that was started by a group of advocates, citizens, Indigenous citizens who said, look, we know that you have to teach the Armenian genocide and the Holocaust, but what about what happened here in our own backyard? And so they were really advocating to get our history included, Indigenous history included, with those, particularly the boarding school era, taught in public schools. They got the support of their local elected officials through the state of Michigan, and they really tried to help them carry this work and make that change. Well, it didn't happen, but they got creative. And so instead of having the change to legislation or the law, what ended up happening is that money for the first time was, there's a fancy word for that, I always forget it. Appropriated, yes. Money was appropriated to be able to, tribes were named in this appropriation for the first time. That's historical. The Confederation of Michigan Tribal Education Departments and the Michigan Department of Education to design, implement, and evaluate professional learning and optional curriculum modules for the purpose of learning Indigenous tribal history that is inclusive of the boarding schools. This is particularly in the appropriation named for grades 8 through 12, but we all know that learning can happen before that and learning happens beyond that. And so we're really trying to create something that is accessible for every level of learner, as this is everybody's history in the state of Michigan, the place that we live, work, and play. The way that we're doing that is through our co-governed policy. And so you'll see in the picture here in the slide that we bring the partners together and that this is ground in Indigenous knowledge systems and that the communities are saying, these are the stories that we want told about us, not the stories other people have about us. And so that's really the foundation for which this project is going forward. And so that's one of our priorities again, is that Indigenous knowledge systems, they are the expert in the work that we are doing. The beginning of this, we were thinking, what is the 101? What is the very foundation that folks need to understand about the tribes and the history and the relationship, past, present, and future? And so we were like, well, we'll develop this learning module, and it just still was it wasn't getting it. And so then we started looking at other states and saying, okay, what did you all do? What have you done? And they have this idea of essential understandings, the things that are most essential to know. And so we read, again, we love to read things. And so we went through and said, we like this, yes, yes, this is what's missing. And so those bullets that you see along the right side are each of those things that are essential to the communities for the citizenry of the state of Michigan to know about us. And so I won't go through the list, but that's more learning to come as far as essential understandings are rolled out and will be launched very shortly. Fingers crossed.
So one of the opportunities that we've been able to have in this partnership, not just between MDE and the tribal communities and the tribal nations, but it's also then again within the department. And so a comprehensive history webinar series, when this series was first initiated, we got the phone call and said, boy, we'd really like you to do a webinar. I want to say that was probably 2 years, maybe 3 years ago now, that the initiative with CMTED did one, I think it was the second webinar in the series. But we're back. Apparently we get invited back. There was a session around tribal libraries. I'll have Melissa talk about that. That was actually convened in December and recorded. And then to Melissa with the fingers crossed, we actually are scheduled to talk about the essential understandings for Michigan on April 30th for that webinar. So a little bit of a teaser there. You want to talk about the one from December?
Sure, you can watch it. I recommend that. But it's also how the Saginaw Chippewa Indian Tribe brought together the knowledge keepers in our community and reframed and restructured the way library systems are organized. Dewey, the Dewey Decimal System, read about that individual as well. Not a very good character, especially toward, indigenous people and a lot of different people. And so we were thinking, why are we organizing our knowledge around somebody who didn't even like us or didn't even want to believe that we exist? And so we, what's it called, deconstructed that, put in our indigenous knowledge system, and now our libraries, we have 3 in our community, are serving as the new organizational tool for organizing our knowledge in the way that we understand and that is essential to our communities.
I think the piece that we're hoping we can leave you with, and then we'll turn it to Dr. Rice. This is to be of service from the initiative's perspective is truly a privilege. One of our core principles of initiative is that we practice Indigenous servant leadership. Our role and responsibility, not just to the agency, but to the tribes, to the individual students and families that we are working on behalf of, truly is a privilege, and we don't take it lightly. I just wanted to leave with that note. Is there anything you want to add?
I don't. Just miigwech for your time, and I will hand it over to Dr. Rice.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Board members, before we begin with your comments and questions, I'd like to thank our presenters today. Their knowledge is vast and deep. Mine is a stream compared to their ocean. But I am here to share a little bit about the power of learning more, about people and history, about which we should have been taught as a matter of course during our education. And Ms. Tilley, we've had this conversation many times. We can't build a better past, but we can build a better future. And for me, much of that building is learning. I've tried to learn more about Indigenous history and culture, partly in my professional work and partly in my personal life. Educators have a responsibility to role model the lifelong learning that they promote in classrooms. You can't expect students to do what you're not prepared to do. And so I've benefited from lessons learned at Indigenous gatherings, museums, or cultural centers in 4 states in recent years. These lessons learned are part of a comprehensive history instruction initiative about which Dr. Garcia will update you this afternoon, about which Ms. Isaac, soon to be Dr. Isaac, shared with you this morning. But they also extend well beyond this initiative. They include the reality that our country's history predates our country's history, irrespective of what we were taught. Sometimes the discovery is that there was no discovery at all. With respect and appreciation, I thank Melissa Isaac, Jen Huskin-LaPointe, Jen's husband, Lynn in absentia, and our CMTED tribal partners for their lessons on the journey which continues. Thank you. And board members, I open it up to you for comments or questions. And as a former teacher, current teacher, but with a different classroom, I do call on people. Ms. Lipton.
So thank you so much. This was really, really very rich, just provocative um, presentation. I just have a couple of questions. My first question is, can you give me a sense of, in your experience, are there certain school districts in Michigan that are sort of getting it better than others? From your, I'm not asking you to name names,
Okay.
but
I was
I'm
like,
just, I'm just
Dr.
wondering if
Rice,
you
what do we do?
could comment on is there a variety of school districts that are sort of taking up the recommendations? And if so, are there any lessons learned in terms of successes?
Well, I'll take the first cut and then I'll turn it to my colleague Melissa. Yes, the short answer to your question is yes. There are some local districts in Michigan that are just further along, either in their understanding around Indigenous history, teaching Indigenous history. I mean, having some of those pieces in place. I think we talked to you about the history work that we're doing. As Melissa mentioned, I think in her comments, this is a piece of the broader, really the government to government space. That includes our local districts. So we spend a good deal of time helping local superintendents in terms of building their relationships with tribal nations. There are expectations that local districts are to be in a consultative relationship with tribes as well. But we've been working alongside of them along the way. We talk a lot in our work about patience and grace. We are asking people to either have a relationship with a sovereign nation that they didn't even know existed, or that they have, in some communities, pretty tough legacies, to be candid. I mean, there are some very difficult legacies in some of our communities between local districts and the tribal nations. But particularly to the history work, we're also asking teachers to teach something that they probably never had themselves. We've really stepped into a space of co-learning that the educators and the students are going to need to learn this together, because we're asking a lot of teachers to teach something that they never learned themselves. If you want to add.
Yeah, just to kind of summarize that, yes, there are districts and tribes, and they have a very strong positive relationship, and there are some that don't have any relationship at all because they don't know each other. That relationship hasn't initiated yet. And then there are some who are carrying these really strong negative legacy relationships and trying to figure out how do they move that forward. And so we provide the support that we can when they want it. Sometimes we nudge a little bit to say, hey, we're here to help. How can we be of assistance? But it's across the board. There's a lot of different levels of that relationship or no relationship with the districts.
And then just a follow-up question. Have you found the intermediate school district model to be helpful in that? The reason why I ask is that, it is somewhat unique to Michigan. I mean, we are very proud of our local control, heritage, philosophy, et cetera. And that is a different model than in other states, which have a much more sort of, top-down. But have you found the ISDs to be a useful model in sort of creating those relationships with the local school district as sort of an entree point? Or I'm just curious what your experience has been in that regard.
Begin you.
Yeah, sure. I'll go first this time. And then we have been lucky enough, I've been lucky enough to be invited by the ISD, a couple of them, superintendents, to come in and say, hey, let's have this conversation, help me understand, and really be positioned in a learning mode. And people don't know what they don't know.
Yes.
And so for them to feel safe enough to ask, an Indigenous person, I don't know how to do this, can you help me? They've really put themselves in a vulnerable position to ask that. And so, graciously going in and knowing that sometimes the slate is blank, and sometimes there's a little bit, and sometimes we need to, put that information aside and, talk about what's happening, in the here and the now. We are currently pivoting toward an endeavor that is specific to the ISDs, and so I'm going to hand that part over to Jen.
Yeah. So I agree with Melissa's statements around the ISDs. Some of the answer to that too is similar to the LEAs, the local districts, because if they have relationships, sometimes they're great, sometimes they're new, sometimes they're not yet. So we're stepping into that space. I think one of the biggest conversations that we try to have in the state education space and the local education space is that Indigenous learners are in Michigan's public schools. That includes their ISDs. And so really taking that systems approach as we step into space. The new space that I was going to say dipping our toe into, but I don't think she's going to have a toe dip strategy. We are currently partnering with the Office of Special Education in terms of the work that they're doing with supporting their cohorts for the ISDs, specifically around students with disabilities. The origins of IEI, and for those of you who are like, how did Terry get to be, like all of those kind of questions that might be swirling. It initiated because at the time when we were asking what the work was with tribes in Michigan, and we just did some initial convening with the tribal ed departments and their staff in this room actually, we shared the data that we had with them. And one, they were like, that's not right. You're way off, which fast forward, we're like 70% undercounting Indigenous kids in Michigan. Total other presentation. But part of it was an awareness that the highest majority of students receiving special education services are American Indian in Michigan. And so coming around full circle to the work that we're going to be stepping into with the Office of Special Education is specifically looking at those ISD supports for students in their systems.
Thank you, thank you. I mean, I think that the work that you're doing is really, really important. It's really novel. And I really, really commend the sort of systems approach that you're taking in terms of, tackling a pretty formidable problem in a very, very logical, and systemic way.
Thank you, Ms. Lipton. Ms. Snyder?
Yeah, can I just clarify what you just said or just ask you to repeat it? You said the highest, is it per capita broken down by ethnicity, special education population is Native American in Michigan?
The highest percentage of students who are receiving special education services.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you, Ms. Snyder. Ms. Guzmano, and then Senator Bullock.
Well, first of all, thank you, because I think since I started in the Michigan Teacher of the Year role, one thing that I have just learned a lot about is the Indigenous Education Services. Laura Baker, who by coincidence is here today, is from Shepherd. So you did the powwow. Yeah. And so when I visited Shepherd, she showed me the tribal office and had some students talk to me, and it was just a really eye-opening experience. And one of my questions was, a lot of us, I'm a high school ELA teacher, and so we've tried really hard to add in Indigenous literature into our classrooms and our curriculums, but I see that some of this work was directed at social studies. And so I'm wondering, because I felt kind of like the Wild West when we added Warrior Girl on Earth to our curriculum, and I taught the prologue to There by Tommy Orange, but I still felt like I was, trying to, like you said, educate myself. So my first question was about ELA teachers specifically, but then also I know a lot of teachers are lifelong learners. We love that. What kinds of things do you have for, and again, I speak from a secondary world, but you can feel free to add K-12, but that wouldn't be subject specific.
For sure. So we know that literature is important across all subjects. It's important to science, it's important to social studies, it's important to math. There are a lot of things that literature can support to make it more rich. And so we understand that, and that's part of the thing that we're gonna roll out with this Indigenous History Project is literature specific, because we understand that a lot of our libraries are lacking the our stories by us. And so that's what we're in the process of doing for educators so that they can maybe add to their libraries or to their lessons in a way that's meaningful for them.
Yeah, I think you'll see too when it's all starting to roll out, Melissa referenced earlier, the essential understandings for Michigan, and they had that list of those 15 essentials. Even coming into the space of trying to figure out the 101, like the entry point, but also the fact that these are things that are teachable, knowable in any course. It's not history specific. I mean, understanding some of those essential constructs about Indigenous people are going to be just as easily taught through math and science and ELA.
So,
And the arts.
And the
Can
arts.
can I speak a follow-up, though? So I know Central has a good connection, obviously, given its proximity, but is there other work going on at the other universities? I think, wasn't your thing earlier in the summer at Michigan State, or there's some connection to Michigan State, correct?
We have a broad network of
Okay.
support. So when I said the Confederation of Michigan Tribal Education Departments meets quarterly,
Huh.
people are hungry for information, for resources, for contacts. And so their second day of meeting is dedicated to partners, and Michigan State is one of them.
Okay.
Western Michigan is another, CMU, Ferris State, Grand Valley.
U of M.
Yeah, U of M. They do show up at those meetings to, strengthen their relationships with the tribes, but also to offer resources and support in the ways that they can.
Thank you, Ms. Guzmano. Senator Bullock, Ms. Tilley.
It's more commentary, but I did have a question in there, and I got so much in my head. So first, I'm an advocate of learning other cultures. Being one that's advocated hard for African American or Black history, and I know folks go back and forth between Indigenous or Native American, but I know the flavor is even in my home. So my sister has a different father, but her father was from Sweetwater, Tennessee. So he's Comanche, I believe. So that was my first introduction into learning another culture. And then I went to school in Albuquerque, New Mexico. So the Pueblo and Apache brothers took me in. And so then coming home and working in the Senate, well, I first worked juvenile justice, and we would get kids, but we couldn't do anything with them if we can get them back to the tribe. But then we had to go through this whole, so I started learning more and more and more and more and more and more. And just as I advocate for, Carter G. Woodson started Negro History Week, it's now Black History Month. Is there a effort to create more than just Indigenous People Day to something that's more robust for us to get an understanding of things like that? And so I didn't know if it was something statewide or something national. And then when I was in the Senate, I would meet with the tribal leaders all the time. And so we would help with things. So some of the stuff you said came to fruition after I left, which is good to see. Ironically, my name, I was given a name. I am Tatanka Yatanka. So I'm Sitting Bull from another group and organization. So it's pretty cool.
So to address we have had this discussion actually about Native American Heritage Month, which is November. Yes, it's great to emphasize, Native American and Indigenous histories and peoples during that time. But the conversation often is it should be year-round and not just during the month of November, which is what we're hoping that this project is going to support. So things are kind of falling into place to get us beyond the month of November.
Well, because I do speeches all the time where I say Black history is more than American history, it's world history, and it's 365. So I totally embrace that, especially with the efforts to suppress.
Right.
You talked about the Dewey Decimal System. There are other things that try to suppress all our other histories, which, and just knowing a lot of things we take for granted were created by other cultures and through their history. These microphones, the elevator, all of those things they're not credited to somebody Black, but through history we know that somebody Black, so I'm following this all the way. So we support.
Thank you, Miigwech.
Thank you, Senator. Ms. Tilley.
I think like everybody else, I'm really excited about this partnership. One of my concerns over the years has been that there's no Native American voice here at the state board table. I think that that would absolutely be powerful. And wanted to ask, um, is there currently any programs or initiatives for students to come on for field trips so that they can come see the powwows or different activities, events that you guys have so they can learn more about your culture and get more exposure? And because I think the average student probably has not been on tribal land. And if there are, how does that work? What do they look like? And is there any initiative to expand that?
Sure. First thing, I actually thought about this on the way down. I'm like, you know what? I'm coming. Like, everyone make a space for Melissa Isaac someday. It's gonna happen. Floating that out there. Yeah, manifesting that, yes. The second is all land is indigenous land. When we're talking about federal land or the allotted land that reservations are on, that map that I showed earlier with the seats of government, they each have a website or a social media account. And, well, they do have websites too, but that's where they announce the things that people are invited to. And so if I was going to leave the board with a message and how do you get engaged, how do you learn more, you have a great leader and learner here with Dr. Rice, who has done his share of learning in our spaces. But to also really focus on that relationship and getting involved. Don't insert yourself in the community. I mean, I don't have to say that to this board. I know they know that. But start to generally formulate relationships where once you're invited in, that's a big deal. And Renee spoke to that a little bit. She's been invited in because she came in with genuine curiosity. She wanted to know. She didn't want to, there was no reciprocation. Well, if I come here, then you should give me this. Genuine relationship. And so I invite you all to learn more. We are in a relationship now, everybody here. So if anybody has any questions or wants support or anything like that, I'm available. I know Jenna's available. And we're here to help grow that. And we hope that, you're interested in growing that.
So currently, there's none that you know of as far as with the schools, with students coming?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, no, they're, again, the websites, but for example, in Mount Pleasant, the Saginaw Chippewa Indian Tribe, we have the Zeboing Cultural Center. Field trips, presentations, they bring in buses of students all of the time. That's one example. I know that they do programming at the Grand Rapids Museum. I don't remember exactly what it's called, the museum in Grand Rapids, but they do have programming throughout the year that is focused on Indigenous communities and learners and histories, and they bring in students as well. But yeah, the community events, those aren't really planned a year in advance or anything like that. So just keep an eye on the social media accounts to know when those things are coming. And then you'll have an idea of field trips that you can take students to as well.
And I think to the question, very first question about the relationship with the local school districts, it depends. Some local districts are doing a lot of this. They're engaged, they have the relationship with the tribes, or they have the relationships with the cultural centers, and they're already bridging in. And that's not even necessarily only in the seats of government space for the map that we showed earlier. It's still, this depends, and I think that's why we're really trying to take a systems approach to this, is so that all kids, Indigenous and non-Indigenous, have an opportunity to be in those spaces to continue that learning process. So it's happening. Is it happening enough and everywhere? No, not yet. Stay tuned.
Thank you.
Sure.
And then lastly, how can the State Board of Education better support?
That was going to be what that answer was. I was hoping somebody would ask that. What can the board do to support?
That is my question. Not just support, but how do we engage? How do we become a part of the learning? So you started to say part of that,
For sure.
and I think we talk about it, but we need to really be intentional. I think that this is the year that we really need to learn more about, what we're talking about at this table. The other piece that I will just mention to this board is that, this was birthed out of a resolution that, well, partially birthed out of a resolution that we passed pushing for comprehensive history. And I think that now it's time to take those additional steps for us to learn, for us to help, uh, the world that we live in to better um, understand our diversity and appreciate our diversity.
For sure. Just to kind of reiterate what I said earlier, um, the Michigan Department of Education, we're their Indigenous Education Initiative, doing this work on behalf of the department. You called it, what, a proxy? We're here for you all too. So I say let's continue the conversation, and we can figure out, because everybody's dynamics are different at this table, right? And what I can tell you about it, my communities, my Indigenous communities, is if you're there for a genuine reason, everybody's welcome. Seriously, people say that we don't just say that, we mean it. But again, we can help facilitate that through whatever ways.
Yeah. I think the biggest thing to support right now is to engage.
Yes.
Is to, you can get a hold of us, you can get a hold of us through Dr. Rice, through Dr. Garcia, through Tribal Liaison Rink. Like, there are multiple ways to engage with us as an initiative. We're happy to extend those invitations for different things where we're going to be as well. So you can feel like that invitation is coming from a source to bring you into the community. As someone who is not from the community, I will tell you that, yeah, when you get invited in, come. It matters. So if someone's taken the time to invite you, as best as you can, be present. It's not a small thing to get those invitations. So I would say engage, keep learning.
When will the 101, did you say when it will be completed?
We're going to be presenting on that through the Teaching Comprehensive History webinar in April.
Okay.
Yeah. End of April.
Yep.
Any other questions or comments from board members? You mentioned boarding schools and the boarding school era. Maybe you could share a little bit more about that, just so, because it's a sensitive subject, but you raised it, and I don't know that everybody knows what the era was.
Sure. Well, one of the parts of history that we often don't learn about is because it's difficult history, and there's a responsibility to the generational damage that was inflicted during that time. Boarding schools were created to erase our identity, take away our languages, take away how we looked, how we dressed, and really make us into something that we were not. Carlisle in Pennsylvania, Carlisle Indian School, I mean, they're right in our backyard. The Mount Pleasant Indian Industrial Boarding School, right in my community. Children were taken away, removed from their homes at a very young age, and taken to these foreign places where we were not allowed to speak our language. It's because of that generational damage. I introduced myself to you, but I am not a fluent speaker of my language, and we're doing what we can to revitalize that and learn that, but that wasn't by choice. And so those schools were intentionally set up by the federal government to, the quote is, kill the Indian and save the man. And so that was their approach to doing that. And so those schools were funded by the federal government, but then sometimes carried out by different churches. And so the state of Michigan currently is doing a study to identify those places and the students that attended there. Every one of those schools has a cemetery where students were buried because they never went home. And so it's you think about the thousands of students whose lives were lost there, and the babies and the generations that could have came from them are no longer, there's no ability for that to happen anymore. And so our numbers are small, but not as small as you think. We are doing what we can to revitalize the history, the language, and those things that were taken away. And so for that, I'm very grateful for the support that we have received through the appropriations to get this in front of our students and our teachers, through MDE for organizing this initiative. But it's a dark part of history that indeed did happen, and something that happened in our own backyards. And so, bringing that to the classroom so that people can learn, our history as in collective our, is really an important thing for us to be able to move forward.
I think too, Dr. Rice, to your question, for those of you that are sitting at the table, and I'm not going to ask any ages, but the last school in Michigan was closed in 1986. So this is not history that was hundreds of years ago. Not that that would make it any impact that way, but it's always important when we talk with folks that this was our generation. I would have had students that are my age that would have been in those schools here in Michigan.
Dr. Rice, thank you for raising that question. And when you talk about 1986, the last school closed, but when you think about Indigenous people and the things that we were taught, even more recent, and the narrative that was told to us. So appreciate this effort, to say the least. The other thing that I've noticed and appreciate is more and more bodies that I'm a part of, groups that I'm a part of, actually recognize the Indigenous lands. And is that something that you all are helping groups and bodies, schools, to recognize and to make sure that they're verbally acknowledging?
So I am actually called in quite a bit by different school districts to kind of come and help with land acknowledgements. The first thing that I ask is why? Why do you want a land acknowledgement? Oftentimes it's performative. And so if they want it just to, well, we want to acknowledge and we want to say it, that's not a good enough reason. You have to follow that up by action. And if districts aren't ready to do that, then they're not ready for a land acknowledgement. And so that's that's how I consult with on those particular topics and ask that, first question. Some of them are ready and they do follow up and they do make changes and they do, implement, and when they say it, they mean it. That's where the biggest impact can happen. So when districts are ready, yes, we do help with land acknowledgements, but only if they're meaningful and will impact change in a positive way for everybody.
And I guess change in a positive way could, and doing something could be recognizing why it's not still named in that way.
Correct.
Okay.
It's when the appropriation came through for the history project, we worked collectively with CMTED, the Confederation of Michigan Tribal Departments, and we crafted what we called mutual considerations. So throughout the course of the development of this work, what are things that we are always going to hold to? Melissa mentioned this earlier when we were talking about how we hold the children as the focus of our work. So some of the decisions are hard, but that's what we need to do. We had the same type of conversation about stepping into Indigenous history development work, and one of the mutual considerations that was consensus was the fact that this will be place-based. People need to know the history and where. It's not just on a timeline and not just on a piece of paper, but that one of the core considerations as we do this work is that it is in place of where these histories and these stories are.
Ms. Snyder, thank you, Dr. Pugh.
What was the school that closed in '86, and where was it in Michigan?
Holy Childhood, Harbor Springs.
Where, Harper Woods, you said?
Harbor Springs.
Harbor Springs, okay.
The year dates back to, when does it begin?
18. Oh, not 19. 18, yeah, 18. We will have to get back to you on that.
Yeah, that's fine. No, we appreciate our presenters. Board, thank you for engaging. I think you made the point about the value of learning. I think you role modeled about the value of being open to learning. And I appreciate you. I appreciate our presenters as well. It's easy to talk about presenting. It's harder to do it. It opens up a lot of different emotions. So thank you so much. Appreciate you.
Miigwech, thank you.
Thank you.
Board, it's 11:21. The next item on today's agenda is a presentation on Michigan's top 10 strategic education plan. Goal number 8, provide adequate and equitable school funding. During this presentation, you will receive an update on progress toward the strategic education plan goal 8 based on the new fiscal year 2025 budget signed into law by the governor in July as amended, which became effective October 1, 2024. We welcome our presenters, Deputy Superintendent Dr. Diane Golzinski, Deputy Superintendent of the Division of Business, Health, and Library Services, and Mr. Spencer Simmons, Director of the Office of Financial Management. This is an informational presentation. No board action is required, but like the last presentation, there may be an impromptu or pop quiz. Presenters, welcome.
Good morning, board. This morning, we're going to touch on a few things as it pertains to providing adequate and equitable school funding for the state of Michigan. On the slides, the next 3 slides you're going to see the metrics that the state of Michigan uses, as well as the School Finance Research Collaborative, to look at how to properly provide adequate and equitable school funding. Funding Michigan's public schools. Since 2015, there have been numerous finance studies done. In January of 2018, the School Finance Research Collaborative, also known as the SFRC, did release the largest and most detailed study. Within that study, they did recommend additional studies be done to further identify school underfunding in the state of Michigan. Those areas consisted of high concentrations of poverty, transportation cost, and capital cost. Many SFRC recommendations have been incorporated into the state aid budget since that point in time over the last couple years. The transportation study specifically in funding under Section 22L, the infrastructure study and funding under Sections 11X, 11Y, 11AA, and 12D are examples of this. On this next slide, you're going to see historical per pupil target foundation allowance funding. Please note that the per pupil foundation allowance is composed of state and local funding solely. From 2019, you're going to see the amount of $8,409, an increase into 2020 of $8,529. In 2021, the amount remained constant at $8,529. In 2022, it increased to $8,700. In 2023, an increase into $9,150. In 2024, an increase of $9,608. The transition from 2024 to 2025, there's an interesting point to highlight. Section 147A, subsection 4, is for unfunded liability. An amount of up to $598 million was set aside for participating entities. The goal of this was to reduce the unfunded liability from 20.96% to 15.21%. Of participating entities, that translates to roughly a $400 increase per pupil. On the next slide, you're going to see SFRC recommendations and a base. It's important to note that the base for the SFRC recommendation is composed of local, state, and federal funding. The cost of SFRC is for the total cost to fund a general education student. When looking at the base for 2018, you're going to see the amount of $9,590. For 2021, an updated amount of $10,421. Adjusted for inflation in 2024, an amount of $11,813. And for the preschool 2018 amount recommended, it's at $14,155. Funding to support economically disadvantaged students in 2025. The one-year increase for Section 31A of $82.9 million. This translates roughly into an 8.7% increase for economically disadvantaged students from 2024 to 2025. A 3-year increase of over $522.5 million from 2022 of $512.5 million to $1.03 billion in 2025, which is a 101.8% increase. This is a doubling of at-risk funding with an opportunity index in 2024.
So you know that children in poverty are those who are considered to come from families who make 185% or less of that federal poverty level. What the SFRC recommended was an additional 35% above their base funding. Remember, their base is local, state, and federal. 35% above that to address child poverty needs. So if we look at what those numbers look like, that recommended base of 11,813, the number of students in poverty is roughly around 775,000. Multiply that out, we get at a minimum $3.2 billion that we are not yet funding for our children in poverty. The study, other than that 35%, also recommended that we look at the nonlinear adverse impact of greater concentrations of poverty. So as there are more students in poverty within a building, we needed to look at what that particularly looks like. So without a study yet, having done that, we did some math just to say what would happen above and beyond that 35%. What would happen if we created a cutoff for funding, additional funding, if the cutoff was at 75% or higher, 75% of the student body being in poverty or higher, the additional cost above that 35% would be $615 million. If we set that cutoff at 90%, the additional cost would be $258 million. Bottom line, we are still underfunding our children in poverty, and we don't yet know by how much, because we don't have a study that gets us at what the high needs poverty concentration is. When we look at English learners, in the state budget, 1 year increase of 26.2% to support English learners in FY25. Over the previous 3 years, we've seen a 99.2% increase for that line item. So just shy of a doubling of funding for our English learners in the last 3 years. The SFRC recommendation, if we were meeting that recommendation, would cost $786 million. So again, we are getting closer, but we are not there for our English language learners. Now, if we look at our students with disabilities, for state funding alone, we had a 1 year increase of 1.7% in Section 51E. When we look over the course of 3 years, it was a 453.9% increase. It changed section numbers in the middle there, but it's all the foundation state funding for students with disabilities, above and beyond that per pupil. What we know about special education and our students with disabilities is that we know what we're spending currently on those students who are identified. So this slide is the most recent data that we have, so it's 22-23, and it tells you the revenue from federal, state, and local. It also gives you what the reported expenditures are for students in special education. So we know that currently we are underfunding total special education by $601 million. That's for 22 to 23. The SFRC actually recommends a weighted difference. So for students with mild disabilities, 0.7% above and beyond. For students with moderate disabilities, 1.5 above and beyond. For students with the most significant disabilities, a complete reimbursement. What we don't have is a breakdown of our costs based on mild, moderate, or severe. We just know our total costs. So we know that we are still underfunding, but we do not yet know by how much. The FY25 budget does include a study that is looking at special education costs. So we hope to have additional information after the end of that study.
Can I ask a quick question?
We're going to finish, and then we'll do the
Okay.
questions. Thank you. Go ahead.
You. When we look at transportation, transportation is something that the department has leaned into heavily. And we're very proud of the fact that for the first time since Prop A, since 1994, when Prop A came about, in FY24, we had $125 million to reimburse school districts for the cost of transporting general education pupils. That funding was maintained in FY25. If we were meeting the SFRC transportation recommendation, we would need to be at $488 million. There is a fund set aside for transportation funding. For FY '26 so far, only 100 million remains in the fund because 350 million was originally set aside, and we've had 2 years of 125 million. This is really important when we look at adequate and equitable school funding because especially for our rural areas, they spend a lot more of their general fund money to get kids to school. And we know that kids being physically in school is the best education. Next, we're looking at capital costs. So SFRC recommended a funding placeholder and additional study to happen. That placeholder was around $674 million. That study is taking place, and we expect to have results from that study soon. If we just look at capital costs reported, we would be at a $5.2 billion, with $2.3 billion of that just for operations and maintenance, the rest for construction and improvement costs.
On this next slide, you're going to see total funding the state of Michigan had available to support education, composed of local, state, and federal revenue. In total, you're going to see a total amount of $25,170 million. On this next slide, you're going to see the same table you saw before, the total amount of funding the state of Michigan had available for supporting education at $25,170 million. However, there is a comparison to the SFRC recommended amounts, both on the low end and on the high end. Please pay very close attention to the special education costs you see listed here. The amount you see listed here at $4 billion somewhat matches the amount in the previous slides presented by Dr. Golzinski as far as expenses that the state of Michigan had. If you think about the revenue that was collected at roughly $3.4 billion in comparison to the expenditures reported by districts at $4 billion, there was a $600 million shortfall. So just looking at that alone by itself, you see that the state of Michigan is underfunded. But still, there is more. There's a study being done right now to try to isolate and look closer at the cost of special education. And based on the results of that study, we do believe that it's going to show that there's an even larger gap in comparison to the amount of money we receive in revenue versus the amount of money to support expenditures. Also looking at capital costs, as Dr. Golzinski mentioned earlier, there's a study that's being done to try to project and show the amount of money that it costs for districts to truly fund their capital cost. At $5.2 billion, which was reported in 2023, we are currently in 2025. So you're going to see, hopefully, once that study is done, there still is a major gap in between how much funding we have available to support capital costs versus how much is going to be reported in expenditures. In summary, 2023 and 24 were amazing years, historical years since Proposal A. And FY25 was still a very good year as well in funding to support education. But there still is a major gap in the amount of funding that we have available to support education versus how much is needed to truly fund education in the state of Michigan. Looking at those two charts previously, you're going to see that, or you could see that, the state of Michigan is severely underfunded by billions of dollars annually to support education.
Thank you. Dr. Rice?
Thank you, Dr. Golzinski. Mr. Simmons, we appreciate your presentation. That was very quick and very information-packed. Ms. Snyder, to you.
Where do we start? Can you define high needs? You mentioned 3 different areas. So you mentioned high needs and ESL, special education. I'm assuming special education is mental, emotional, physical impairments. And these disabilities are rated from mild, moderate to severe, correct?
That's the way SFRC broke out the funding needed for special ed students.
And they separate that out for funding high needs, which is just ESL, or is there another definite way of defining high need funding?
High needs poverty? Is that what you're just?
I think you guys mentioned just high needs in general. So my question is that how they defined it? Is high needs? What defines a high need?
So this, if you can tell me which slide, I'd be happy to help.
It was what you were speaking of, so I just took notes on it. So what is a high need? What did they define as high need? And is that separated out from special education?
So the high needs poverty is separate from special education.
Okay, and what is defined in high needs?
Poverty. It's based
Anything,
on
just
poverty.
poverty, they don't,
It's
because
children.
you also mentioned ESL, so.
It's concentration of poverty. So the more students in a building that are considered to be living in poverty, then the higher the needs are to address poverty.
You also mentioned ESL, so could someone be an ESL student and not live in a high concentration poverty area?
Of course.
And still be a
Yes.
high need?
Yes, those are
and get
separate
money? Okay.
categories, yes.
So what defines high needs is still my question that stands. So is it poverty, ESL, are there any other factors?
In this case, we are discussing poverty.
Okay. In SFRC, they're discussing poverty.
Correct.
Okay. Do they consider anything else to be a high need that they aren't researching at this time?
Okay, aren't research.
Slide 8 may be helpful.
So Ms. Snyder, you'll see on this slide, this is a compilation of the SFRC recommendations and the different categories, if you will, in which the SFRC based their recommendations. So they had multiple different ways of studying these different categories, and then they looked at what was best for students in Michigan across those different ways for each of these categories. So the base funding, which is local plus state plus federal, the poverty funding, the ELL or English language based on their scores for their WIDA test, then our students with disabilities based on mild, moderate, or severe, and then also preschool numbers.
And those are mental, emotional, physical, cognitive impairments that are broken down into mild, moderate, severe disabilities.
For students with disabilities.
Yes, okay. How about the legislation on dyslexia recently? Did they weight any funding for students that have additional need?
The weighting for special education was by those 3 categories: mild, moderate, severe. 70% over and above base, 115% over and above base, full cost reimbursement for mild, moderate, and severe, respectively. Dyslexia was not mentioned specifically that I recall in the study.
Okay, just one more question. And
I
then
don't
I'll
believe the
sit
new
with it a little
dyslexia
bit.
legislation.
So we have a $25.1 billion budget statewide. And I'm seeing $4 billion of that budget is considered to be covering special education costs within the SFRC study. Is that right? Am I understanding, it looks like slide 20 correctly?
Oops, I hit the wrong button.
Here. Yes,
Here, so
$4 billion
this
is what was listed.
Reported costs.
Cost, and that's from 2023. So we listed that based upon having available information. You'll see the same thing as well as in the capital cost. We used reported 2023.
Okay, $4 billion in special education costs, total budget's $25.1 billion. How many special education students do we have in the state of Michigan?
I do not know off the top of my head. I can get you that number.
Approximately 200,000.
Okay, I'll sit with that for a minute. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Snyder. Other questions? Mr. McMillan.
Thanks for your presentation. I didn't see any per pupil that included federal funding. Maybe I missed it. Was it in any of the slides?
There's 2 different. So the state per pupil does not include federal. It is local plus state.
Right.
The base funding for SFRC includes federal plus state plus local.
But in the slides, was there any number that showed per pupil that included federal funding?
No, sir.
No.
No, and I can tell you exactly why. Because it would blow this whole presentation up. Detroit gets $28,919 per pupil. This is based on the all sources published by the MDE, Bulletin 1014, published February 2024. Detroit gets $28,919 with all sources per pupil. That's 89% higher than Rochester's $15,284. Pontiac, it's $28,825. That's 89% more than Rochester schools as well. Flint gets $29,640 per pupil, 94% higher than Rochester's $15,284. So, and I could go on and on. So again, the deception is thick here. And I don't care what company that is cited. We know that if they ever came out with something that said significant underfunding is not present, they would go bankrupt. Every one of them. So I can tell you any organization that has been hired showing significant funding needed, every one of them always has their study showing significant funding all across the country. It never fails. So if they ever came out with one that didn't, they'd be bankrupt. They would no longer be asked to do any studies because the result is always decided ahead of time, not maybe exactly, but pretty much before any of these organizations or companies are hired. Thank you.
Thank you. And you cited to Bulletin 1014. Could you tell us the date of that bulletin, please?
I did tell you the date, February 2024.
Thank you very much. So it's associated with the 22-23 school year?
Yeah, apparently, yes.
Okay. And it includes pandemic relief funding?
If you,
I'm asking the question. It's your citation. I'm asking the question.
I'm not sure, but the numbers are similar otherwise, because I think Rochester.
Numbers are similar with and without pandemic relief funding?
Did Rochester get any pandemic relief?
Not compared to Detroit, it didn't. It got some, but it didn't get, it got much smaller per pupil than did Detroit.
Okay, I'm just saying that there's a lot of deception. So what is it for 23-24? Why isn't federal numbers in there?
Deception.
Why aren't they in there? They aren't in there because it blows up the whole thing, right? So there's a lot of deception. All you got to do is just put a few numbers in there, but you won't because it skews the narrative. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Ms. Tilley?
This came up before when I first joined the board. And we met with our legislators. We had the luncheon with the legislators, and one of the things that we were pushing for was equitable funding. And so this argument was presented by some of our counterparts in the legislature. And I think it would be advantageous to really do a presentation so people understand funding, not just here at the board, but for our legislators as well. The need for additional funding and where that funding goes, because federal funds can't just go anywhere. They have to be allocated, correct? So I think that an in-depth presentation so people really understand funding would be helpful.
For those that want to really understand funding.
In an honest way.
Thank you, Ms. Talley.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Other questions or comments or reflections? First bites and then second bites. Dr. Pugh.
I do, I want to first start by saying one of the words that board member McMillan said that I believe was deceptive, and to Dr. Rice's point, is getting versus got. There may have been some school districts that got or received funding as a result of emergency needs that were related to the pandemic. And I think, Dr. Rice, you were pointing out that those are not ongoing, that's not ongoing funding. I know we were just in Flint just last month talking about this, and you've given us all types of anecdotes and thoughts and ways to understand the differences between recurring dollars versus non-recurring dollars. And I'll pause there for a moment because that has been very difficult for obviously this board to understand, but also for the general public to understand. And I think that we have to be clear because it could be quite misleading, especially as this board our mission is to ensure that our schools are equitably and adequately funded. And we've been doing everything that we can to ensure that those historical budgets continue to undo the harm that has been caused by unfunded, underfunded, uh, harmfully funded schools throughout this state. And if we can't understand, then how can we make sure that the general public understands, and thus our legislators be moved to do something about it? I'll pause there for a moment before I ask the question that I had.
You're going to pause for my comment, or you're going to?
Yes, just to make sure I was.
Okay. Well, I think the important piece, just because I don't want to intrude on the Q&A, but pandemic relief money was never meant to be enduring. Recurring revenue have to be equal to or greater than recurring expenditures, or districts have long-term issues. You have to fund on a recurring basis children's needs, and those children's needs are manifest in terms of the recurring expenditures. If your recurring revenue isn't equal to or greater than your recurring expenditures, ultimately you dissolve your fund balance, and ultimately you're no longer an ongoing concern. And this is the conversation that we had in Flint. It's a conversation that we've had with other school districts in the state that have struggled in a variety of different ways, and it's part of our service to them. It's part of the service of the Department of Treasury to them as well. Anyway, back to you.
No, I appreciate that. I just wanted to make sure I wasn't the one putting out misinformation. So, when we're looking at the expenditures for special education revenues, do those expenditures get us to meeting the real needs that our districts have?
That is something we do not yet know.
Okay.
And that is something we are hoping will be a part of this FY25 study.
Okay.
Okay, and I'm going to say no from my experience in multiple states, number one, and from what we see simply on the page. You noted a slide which showed the gap between current revenue for special education at approximately $3.4 billion and current expenditures for special education at approximately $4 billion, a gap of approximately $600 million. I think you've represented as $601 million. That is not the difference between what we spend and what SFRC recommends that we spend. It is simply the difference between what we have and what we spend. It is an actual to an actual. It is not an actual versus a normative. And I think it's really, really important to understand that in other states that better fund their young people, they better fund their students with disabilities as well. So it's part and parcel of the whole. You better fund one group, you better fund the whole. And a rising tide raises all boats in a fashion. And so one of the issues with underfunding in general is that your ability to support students with disabilities is adversely affected as well. You end up pulling education from general education into special education to shore up your special education funding, but you don't shore it up to the recommended level under SFRC, the 70% over and above base, the 115% over and above base, the cost reimbursement for mild, moderate, and severe, respectively. You fund better, but you don't fund recommended. And it's sometimes hard to see this if your only experience is in a single state. But if you've had the opportunity to see this manifest in multiple states, you have a better appreciation of how we are underfunding our broader population, yes, but our students with disabilities, more specifically to the question. Yeah. Please, go ahead. Yeah.
No, I appreciate you for elaborating. And in addition to the SFRC data, we have parents and we have educators who are also giving us that. And I will say, it's been a long time, but my mother was a parapro, and her work was in special education. She worked at the Millette Center. She worked within Saginaw Public School District. But I remember her not only, did students not have, but we also had educators that were coming to their own households to take from their own households to take to students. And we still expect and educators feel required to fill those gaps as well. My other question is around the local sources, and excuse my ignorance, but is that dollar amount spread across all the districts, or how does those local dollars work, resources? I'm looking at slide 15, or, I mean, it's other places.
Sure.
Just in general.
Local sources are local millages, taxes, those things that local districts can impose on those who live in that geographical area.
Right, and if I was looking at this dollar amount, I could think that it just adds up to that bottom line that gets to all districts. All districts don't evenly get those resources, is my point. And then going back to the special education dollars, and I know we'll have some other conversations about this, and we've brought up IDEA and the lack of that promise that was made a long time ago, being unfulfilled. We've written a resolution about that. I know we've talked and have been talking about special education and the needs that we must meet for our children, for our educators, for our parents. And as we're doing this study, I would like to talk about how do we as a body move around and also hear and together collect information on how do we advocate for adequate funding, equitable funding, as well as policies that help to quickly move us forward to address the needs of special education students.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Pugh. That was a lot. Just a footnote to what you said, that when the Education for All Handicapped Act was passed by Congress, signed into law by President Ford, PL 94-142, the expectation was that 40% of those costs would be borne ultimately by the federal government. They've never been borne at that level by the federal government. It's quite a bit lower. In fact, I don't believe that it's ever gotten to half of that amount, let alone the 40%. So not to quibble with 94-142 as amended, which became IDEA over a period of time. But the feds put the mandate on. The feds did not ante up as they had initially promised, to your point. Any other questions or comments before? Excuse me, Dr. Pugh. Any other questions or comments before we pivot to others for first bites and then to Ms. Snyder for second bite?
No, that's
okay. Any other first bite? Hearing and seeing none. Ms. Snyder, to you for second bite.
Okay, so many questions in order to understand this slide, and I know that there are questions that aren't answered at this point in time. That $4 billion, back to the special education costs, does that number include the local revenue designated for special education millages?
That is an expenditure number. It is not a revenue number. Right. It has nothing to do with Act 18. That's on the other side.
All right, the question still stands. Does that $4 billion in costs, special education costs, with our last year's budget, does that include special education millages?
The millages are on the revenue side. Expenditures are on the other side.
So did you use any of the special education millages to account for that $4 billion in costs for special education students?
The millages would be up above in the revenue. They are included in the $3.389 billion. They would not be in the $3.991 billion, which are
So
expenditures.
I'm looking at slide 20. Let's be very specific here. Slide 20 shows that we have a $25.1 billion budget. It includes local, state, and federal revenues. Then right next to it, it includes the SFRC comparisons that we're talking about, which will break down with their special education study. What I'm asking is the line item special education costs, $4 billion. When Pam says that all of that money is not equally parsed out, when you have the left side showing you local revenue of $4.5 billion, I'm assuming that includes things like technology millages, special education millages, and such. So when you have $4 billion in special education costs right next to it with the SFRC comparison, are those all of our special education students being covered underneath that $4 billion in the entire state? Or is that our special education students that are not covered under local revenue for special education millages?
That is known special education costs statewide. So it's all special education costs that are reported to the department. What's important to know is that we don't know that all special education is being funded through special education dollars, but from the general fund dollars, we just don't know where that is all falling until this study is done.
That's very troublesome. We're sitting here at the table talking about this idea that we have this many, we have 200,000 special education students. We know the costs, but we don't know where our special education millage dollars are really what they're
Not
covering.
what we're saying.
No.
If I could, in 22-23, the last year for which we have these data available, we spent $99 billion on special education, just shy of $4 billion on special education. Just shy of $3.4 billion was expressly budgeted for special education. We spent $600 million over and above special education revenue to educate our students with disabilities.
I have questions I would like you to answer more
that's fine.
targeted, more focused, okay?
That's fine.
You can continue to cite that number, and I'm not attacking that number. I'm asking specific questions.
Okay.
So this
Trying
is a
to-
better slide to break down now. You have state sources and local sources underneath special education funding. So the $1.5 billion there versus the $1.2 billion in local versus state sources.
Right.
The state sources, does that go to all students, all special education students in the state of Michigan, or does that just go to any student that's not covered under a special education millage within a local source?
All students.
All students,
It
okay.
would support all students, yes.
Okay, so you have some special education students that are getting local funding for special education and state funding, and some that are only getting state funding and federal funding. Or some that are getting all three, or two out of three.
I think a more detailed conversation about special education funding, I think would serve the board. The reality is that most of our students with substantial disabilities are supported by all three streams of funding. If you are speech only, you may be supported by a speech pathologist who is funded by a single revenue source. But mostly, if you have substantial disabilities, you're going to be supported by those three funding streams, local, state, and federal. And the local, by the way, include the Act 18 millages.
Right. I think a more detailed conversation is necessary because this is just one line item to help understand how our students are really being supported in that category of need. So for example, if you were to look at poverty weight, high need poverty weight, English learner weight, how many students do we identify as that need within that line item? How much is actually getting to each student? And I'm assuming that this is what SFRC is doing, right? So when they come and they say, oh, we've done our research study, it's complete, and I ask those questions then, you know, what ended up happening when we were talking about the original SFRC study was, oh, but we didn't really break down infrastructure and transportation. And you're going, what? We're trying to write a budget and actually adequately fund public education here, and you didn't cover those two line items. So I'm kind of saying, okay, based on experience with SFRC, I really want to break it down in a detailed way and say, how much are we actually getting students in these categories because we know that they have that need and we truly want to fund them, and how much are they currently getting, right? And it's seemingly hard to break down this detailed. We should be able to break that down readily.
There, and there's
then
detail.
we should be able to readily say, this is what is truly needed for each student so that we can get it to them. Again, I have a history of frustration with SFRC, suggesting that we need to increase funding, but not being able to talk about transportation or infrastructure until later. I don't want to see that happen again with special education. I don't want to say, oh, later we'll break that detail down. So I'm asking the questions now. I do think that they need to be reported in detail now so that we can have the detailed conversation now. That's what I'm trying to do.
Okay. No, I appreciate that. I will say that I'm delighted to hear that you have an interest in understanding what our funding needs are, because everybody doesn't have that interest. And those, some people express that any funding study is a hustle. And so I'm delighted that you have this interest. Could we go back to the SFRC slide with the weights, please?
They are a hustle.
Excuse me.
Good point.
I appreciate that. When SFRC put together its recommendations were often, not always, but often expressed in weights, percentages over and above the base funding. And so SFRC did an extensive job of peeling back what it would cost to educate children properly in the state of Michigan. The study was over 300 pages long. It took well in excess of a year and a half to produce. And it really helped understand where we need to be on the base, where we need to be in funding for students with poverty, 35% more than the base, where we should be with English language learners. For those who have the greatest English language learning needs, that is to say the least English language, they're in WIDA's level 1 or 2, they need 70% more than the base. Those in WIDA's level 3 and 4, they need 50% more than base funding. And those in WIDA's level 5 and 6, who are becoming more and more independent English speakers, they need, and the need for less sheltered instruction, they need 35% over the base. So you can see as your WIDA level increases, the amount over and above base decreases. Okay. With special education, as your disability level increases, the level of funding increases because the level of support needs to increase. And there's quite a bit of background in what's behind this. By the way, there's quite a bit of background behind every number on this chart. SFRC said 3 items at the end of a 330-page study, said 3 items deserve additional study. One of them was concentrations of poverty. The second of them was transportation, and the third of them was capital. That they were beyond the scope of the study. That clearly there were costs associated with, costs being borne disproportionately in some districts relative to others, needed to be further studied. But SFRC was not going to hold up 330 pages worth of study for these other studies School Finance Research Collaborative is working on a capital costs study. And that capital cost study is almost done. And we will have a better understanding of capital cost need, not capital costs, but the needs. You cited to capital costs at $5.2 billion statewide, but you didn't cite to need because you don't have a need number, you have a cost number. And the need number exceeds the cost because there are some elements that are being deferred. Some people are trying to get more out of a roof that has no more to give. They're trying to limp along without replacing that for another year, another 2 years, hoping that they don't damage whatever's underneath that roof. So I hear your point about, you know, you'd love to see all of the numbers for all of the categories. We too. But this study acknowledged that it would take years to flesh all of these elements out and did an enormous job, first of its kind job, of fleshing out all of these categories that it did flesh out. So any other questions from anyone? Ms. Snyder? Any other second bites? Back to first bites? Trying. Ms. Lipton for first bite, and then Dr. Pugh for second.
Thank you. I would just like to just put some historical context in the presentation that you're working from. Prior to the legislation, which required the initiation of a study to examine the true costs of educating a child in Michigan, when that question was asked, that truly was a black box. I mean, they're really, and I know from firsthand experience because I was one of the people asking the question, do we even know what are the true costs of educating a child in Michigan? And there were other states at the time, namely Pennsylvania, that had just undergone such a study to try to get a handle on that. So you have to look at this from the lens of the 2010s, when equality was sort of the name of the game in education funding. We've come a long way from that, but you have to mentally put yourself back to the early 2000s when the word on the street was, we want to be equal. Every child should be equal. And at the time, that sounded really, really wonderful. But since that time, we know now that equity is really what we should be striving for, that every student brings their own individual sort of package to school. And the legislation that created the first study was really the first time where in legislative language there was sort of a desire on the part of the state as a whole, and it was passed in a bipartisan fashion and signed by a Republican governor to try to get at what are the true costs of educating a child in Michigan, given our unique structure. We are a local control state. We do give a lot of authority. We've got a very, very complicated funding stream where we've got local millages and we've got ISD millage. I mean, it's a very, very specific and nuanced, specific to Michigan. But I will say, again, I would encourage people to look at the language of the statute for anyone who wants to sort of, you know, criticize and sort of, you know, fan the flames. You know, really, if you look at the language of the study, it was, and the language of the statute was tied toward educating a child in Michigan pertaining to our requirements of meeting the standards of the Michigan merit curriculum. So you can talk about how, you know, oh, it's, you know, it had a predetermined outcome, that is truly an act of deception. There was no predetermined outcome if you look at the language of the statute. It's based on what does it cost to educate a child according to proficiency in the Michigan Merit Curriculum. And that was the first attempt to try to answer a very basic question, which is, what does it cost to educate a child in Michigan? Because when that question was asked back in the early 2000s, the answer was, we don't know. What we do know is that we have a funding scheme based on Proposal A that treats all children, all students in Michigan as equal, which does have a certain, I think, you know, there's some notion that, you know, we want everyone to get the same equal amount, but just based on what we know now about how children learn, we do know that equality is perhaps not what we should be striving for, but equity. And we know now so much more that different populations of students do take more resources. And how you allocate those resources, well, that's a societal decision on the part of the legislature. I mean, you know, just because you do a study and say this is what you need, it doesn't mean that the legislature is automatically going to cough up the money. In Pennsylvania, they're still litigating that issue 20 years later. So anyway, thank you for your presentation, and thank you for constantly bringing us back to the study and the data and really thoughtful people that are really trying to grapple with this question, to really move education and students forward in this state.
Thank you, Ms. Lipton. Dr. Pugh, do you have another?
I did.
And then Mr. McMillan.
Yes. First, let me say I appreciate you, Board Member Lipton. We should all appreciate history based on facts. So thank you for that information. And just looking at the capital costs, you all added a footnote, and I just wanted to come back to that because I didn't necessarily get all that you were saying there, and I wanted to hit the rewind button, but there's not one here. If you could speak to capital costs and our deficits there, and I think especially as we're looking at extreme weather patterns, we just experienced the most horrific pandemic that we saw how classroom sizes, lack of adequate ventilation, old buildings impact our children being in schools. Recent report on asthma and in schools, and I could go on and on and on. Capital costs are important, and just wondering what your thoughts are there and what was that footnote that I missed?
So this particular slide demonstrates the difference between the SFRC recommendation and what we know are reported costs. What we don't know is what the results of that capital cost study are going to say. So we are expecting those here in the next couple of months. We believe that that study is going to demonstrate, based on age of buildings and needs, the maintenance things that Dr. Rice talked about are being deferred, all of that. We expect the number to be significantly higher than even what the total costs reported are. But we don't know that number yet. That was the footnote.
And then we'll hear more about some of the legislation. Recently, I think it was in the supplemental, that there were dollars that were allocated for some capital cost.
Dollars in the fiscal year 25 budget, and in the fiscal year 24 budget as well. There were not substantial dollars, but they were dollars. Some of them were earmarked. Some of them were not earmarked. Yes.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Dr. Pugh. Mr. McMillan.
To correct history, I've had to do this at least twice, I think, in the last 8 years. I'll keep doing it if I need to. I was there also that night. It was the final night of 2014 and of the legislature in 2014, December. It was about 3 o'clock in the morning. The Republicans ridiculously wanted to put a ballot initiative that would increase the sales tax. There was a Christmas tree of all kinds of, of who would get the money. It failed 80-20. It was just a failure. It was a horrible thing. But the Republicans wanted to put this on. Snyder wanted to put it on. And I remember at 3 o'clock or so in the morning, Brandon Dillon, state representative back then, he later became the Democrat chair, was furiously writing the statute that Slipton referred to, writing at least the details of it. And in order to get the votes of the Democrats, this was going to have to be there. And that statute made it so that only one company would qualify to do the study. It was, and the Republicans that in the majority, I voted no, but there was the ones that needed the Democrats to put this on the ballot, would pretty much give anything, I think. And so, yeah, this was the cost to close out the lame duck session in 2014. It was bipartisan, but it was only because they wanted this ridiculous proposal put on the ballot, and they needed the Democrats to vote for it. And it was specifically written so that that it would result, the study would result, as I mentioned before, in, guess what? Huge money needs to be pulled from the taxpayers' pockets and funding a system that has, in some districts, 60% of the funds going to administrative costs as opposed to instructional costs. So, you know, this is, that's the history. And I was there as well. And it has nothing to do with a legitimate study. It is just like all the others. I forget the word you mentioned, but yeah, that is what they are. They are clearly determined. If they ever came back with something that was other than what was already determined, they would no longer have any business, because the left loves to hide themselves in studies, quote unquote. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. McMillan. Ms. Snyder.
Just listening to the summary of experiences that have been had by multiple members of the board before this moment, here now. And my thought process remains the same behind the shortcomings of the study. When you say look at the language of the statute, it's very specific to the language of the statute, which is just what does it cost to educate a child according to Michigan Merit Curriculum. And yet there are mandates around transportation in our state. Okay, you don't offer an opportunity without calculating the cost of the transportation it will take to get the student to and from school to access that opportunity and call that a finance research study. It's from a, you know, if we want to pursue or we desired to do something, logic is certainly at the core of this discussion. And that's why I'm trying to break down slide 20. Because I mean, for lack of better words, I don't want to hear this crap again. Don't come back and say, oh, well, it's specific to X, Y, Z. That's why I said, do we have money baked in here for dyslexia? That legislation has been passed. Are we going to be accountable to it? Are we going to be transparent to the fact that we're accountable to it? We have mandates around transportation. SFRC said this is what it would cost to educate a student. This is what we need to increase it, but darn it, we forgot about that transportation mandate. Give me a break. I mean, it would be appropriate to come to the table and say, that's woefully inadequate and ridiculous. So, you know, you say, we'll wait until this comes out for special education. We'll wait until this comes out for this and that. When it comes out, I don't, like we shouldn't be sitting here asking 10 questions that can't be answered.
So we are sitting at 12:20. We appreciate our presenters and what they have shared. The point of slide 20 is that while apart from pandemic relief funding, funding was $25 billion in 23-24, that SFRC recommends billions of dollars more. That's the point of that. And that will be embellished by the special education study and the capital costs study, not diminished by those studies. It's inconceivable that those studies will find that the costs associated with students with disabilities are less than we are spending now. That is not a thing. And similarly, there is deferred maintenance and replacement of capital in the state of Michigan. And we can certainly have some field trips before the board if the board would like to see some examples of deferred maintenance and deferred replacement in the state of Michigan. The only other thing I'd like to say in closing up is the study to which former State Representative Lipton and former State Representative McMillan are referring, which was approved by the state legislature in 2014, was one of several studies over the ensuing half-decade that all came to the same conclusion: we underfund schools. And that was not the SFRC study. It predated the SFRC study. So there was a study by the Upjohn Institute, there was a study funded by the state legislature, there was the study associated with the Lieutenant Governor's Task Force on Special Education, there was SFRC, there was the Michigan State study, there was the Ed Trust Midwest study, respectively and respectfully in 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, and 20. Board, it is 12:23, and we are adjourned for lunch until 1:15. Thank you, presenters.